G'day mates, part 3. So, one of the things I wanted to show you, the axle. In the first one we talked about how we've got a burn mark here from the bearing being shot, and it's kind of hard to explain why that is, but it's a really easy way to show you now. Got the new bearing. So if you look at this, so I'm holding the outside. If you look really closely, it's actually the inside of the bearing that's moving. It's not actually the axle, it's the inside of the bearing, which is exactly what you want. Old bearing. Notice how the axle's slipping inside it, not moving as much. So what do you think happens when you're actually at speed? Friction, burn marks. That's why you replace your bearing. So you've actually got rotation on your axle rather than basically just a collar that's sitting there and not actually rotating at all. Just sort of show you that, it's the easiest way to explain it. Alright, a couple other things before we get started. The inner race has a collar on one side. This collar goes on your sprocket side. This one without the collar goes on your disc brake side. So make sure you chuck that in the right way. Sprocket side, disc brake side. Circlip, make sure when you've got the, the disc brake side bearing back in, the bigger one, another thing to be aware of, make sure you chuck your circlip back in so there's actually something that's stopping it from popping it back out the other side. So that brings me to the next thing. There are two different size bearings. This one goes on your disc brake side by itself, just one bearing by itself. This goes on your sprocket side, there'll be two. Same size, so a little bit thinner, and they wedge right up against each other. Now another thing a lot of people like to talk about is whether you should actually pop this seal out and actually put grease on the inside of the bearing. Now I don't normally worry about doing that. It's mainly pretty dry where I am. If you're in an area where it's a little bit wet, or you have snow and that sort of thing, you might want to do that because it's going to protect it just a little bit more. But just have a think about it. Don't put too much grease in there. Too much grease is going to be worse than no grease at all because it just solidifies and then it's kind of like it's just got heaps of dirt in there anyway. But what you should do is for your dust seal, put a bit of grease on the inside of this before you chuck it in. And that's the other reason why I don't normally worry too much about it, is you're going to have this seal that sits up against the bearing, a bit of grease in here, which should prevent water and stuff from actually getting into the bearing itself. So that's what I do. Other people like to, like I said, pop it out, put a bit of grease in there. Just make sure you don't overdo it because it can be worse than actually having no grease at all. Alright, so that's it. We'll get started. Very much a same sort of thing as what we did before, just reversal of what we did. So still heat the hub up is the first thing, so make sure you've done that. Then find something that sits on the inner race of the bearing here, so that when you're trying to actually tap them in, you're not tapping on the outside and ruining your seal. You want to tap on the race itself, or the outer race. Generally the inner race is a bit easier to sort of manage. So I found a 24mm socket that kind of fits pretty perfectly around that for me. So that's what I'm going to use when I, after I heat the hub up, I'll get the 24mm socket, sit it on top, give it a tap, and then hopefully everything will just sort of seat in where it needs to be. One more thing I forgot to say, clean the race and everything up, so have a look inside it, make sure you haven't nicked it or anything like that, give it a good clean. Same with the inside of where the bearings are going to go back into the hub, just clean everything up before you chuck everything back in. Make sure there's nothing that's kind of like been nicked or anything. Some people like to get a little bit of fine sandpaper and just run around the inside of these as well, just to smooth them back out again. So just be aware of that. Make sure everything's cleaned up before you chuck it back in, because otherwise if you've got dirt and stuff in there, the first thing that's going to happen is just going to abrase everything on the inside anyway. So make sure it's all clean before you chuck it back together. Alright. 24mm socket. Sits in the race pretty good. First thing is heat the hub again. Make sure you got the right size bearing. So I've got the big one for the disc brake size. So you can see in there at the moment, like it's the right size, but obviously if you just smash that in there now, it's going to take a lot of the meat off the hub itself. So what we're going to do is heat it up before we knock it in. Righto,
I've been heating this for a little while now. So just keeping on going around in a circular pattern. Try not to keep the heat on one spot for too long. Keep it rotating the whole time. Got the socket, my hammer and everything ready to go. And then hopefully it's going to be hot enough that we can knock it all in. So do that very shortly. Prefer it to be a little bit hotter than not hot enough, because it's just going to be harder to actually get the bearing in there. Alright, let's give it a go. The new bearing, the socket. Righto, probably could use a bit more heat, or the other thing you can do is actually chuck them in the freezer before you do the heating of the hub so that they shrink. That one took a little bit more effort to get in than what I anticipated. But you can see now, at least on this side, you can see the groove of where the circlip's meant to sit in. So next part's obviously chuck the circlip back in. Righto, circlip's back in. Just make sure it's actually seated in the groove itself. Make sure it hasn't lifted on any side. Otherwise it's not really going to be a circlip, is it? Alright, now remember this thing. Sprocket side, you're going to have the collar. Drop that in there. There you go, so you can see where it's going to sit up against. And same thing, make sure the inside of the hub's cleared out, but this side, remember we've got two bearings. So this side looks like it's not going to be as tight, so once we heat it up, we should be able to knock these in the same way. But just remember, you got to do two rather than just the one. Righto, the first one's in there, so you can see the inner race, it's kind of like right up against it, which is what you want. That's kind of where it's meant to sit. Now, before you put the next one in, heat the hub again, because you've just lost all the heat when you've done the first one. If you just go ahead and try and smack the second one in now, you're just going to cause more problems and chop more of the inside of the hub out. So take the time, reheat it, and then chuck the other one in. Another thing to remember with this one now is you can actually just heat the top of the hub. Before we had to heat kind of the top and the bottom because we needed to go the whole way through. But now we're just going to be trying to get into this top section, so probably from about midway up the hub to the top of it, that's where we're going to keep heating. Righto, the second one's in. Second one actually went in a lot easier because we had that, heated it up a bit more, still had some residual heat left over from last time. And what will happen now is the outer hub will actually shrink down and then hold onto that bearing. So, they're all in. That's the first good part. Now, next thing is get your seals, grease on the inside, and then they'll just sit in there like that. You should probably just wait a little bit for the hub to cool down before you do that, because otherwise the rubber's going to be expanding a little bit more. But that's pretty much it. So put the grease on the inside of here, pop that in. You're all sealed up then, and you're ready to chuck it back on the bike. Seal. It's all packed in with grease. Just clean the inside of it, don't want any on the outside. And that should just sit pretty snug in here. You may find with these, there we go, starting to go in. When they're brand new, it'll take a little bit. You might need to actually get a punch or a socket again and to knock the actual seal into place. Or you can just maneuver it like I just did then. So when your other side cools down, do the same thing, grease the inside of your seal, put your seal in, and then you're basically good to put it back on the bike. Can grease your axle a little bit if you want, but same thing applies. Don't put too much on. You just want a little bit to, you know, just same sort of thing to seal the dust out and just give it a little bit of lubrication. Cheers. All right, last part of the video before I chuck everything in the bin. So it's Pro X and the number is 23.S114020. Pretty sure I just got this off eBay. See, as you can see, 49 bucks. And looks like these suit a whole heap of other Husqvarnas as well. So there you go, that's part numbers and everything in case you need to order a set. Cheers.